Well, it's that time on the channel again. But hey, you've seen the thumbnail and the title. It's indeed cooler time, baby! No, not that baby. At least not yet. Because we'd already tackled Freeza and Frost, Cooler was a rather tough nut to crack, which we kind of enjoyed doing lately, don't get us wrong, because we've had the likes of Turles and Barbody, our two resident slow burners turning good. What could we do with the brother of Freeza? But how do we make it distinctive enough? Hav and I adore Cooler, who is easily one of our favourite movie villains. You could argue that he is a little too similar to Freeza, but he isn't. At least not entirely. There are some subtle differences that can be used to distinguish this story from the Droidy Boy one. And boy, did this story necessitate some very extensive research and a proper reinvention of the character based on the very scant information that we have about him. Do forgive us for this lengthy introduction. We just want you to think about our thought process. So with that, let's set the scene. Because the street had been leveled, the dust had not yet settled completely. The small Brentian contingent was in awe of the sheer devastation caused by this single, precise attack. Cooler's full power could now be seen by the Bepian resistance, or what remained of it. Or at least what they thought was the full extent. Prince Cooler was never one to reveal all of his cards too soon, even if he was confident that he was outclassing everybody on the battlefield. Those few Bepians that survived, who chose to support him over the resistance, were filled with dread. Relief also, and excitement all at the same time. It was a very weird moment to be alive. Cooler himself wasn't all that critical. He simply had that effect on soldiers around him, and they grew accustomed to it. At least it wasn't as bad as Freeza. Cooler approached a Bepian named Dore, who had asked his father for help in quelling the anti-imperial resistance. He blinked a couple of times before finally gathering the courage in which to speak.
As you can see, further resistance is pointless. Prince Cooler has joined us. You'll do better if you simply surrender and let our peaceful integration into the Cold Force continue.
Though he sounded much more assured than a few moments ago, there was a strange hesitancy in his tone of voice. Cooler had known many soldiers like Dore, or now Sergeant Dore. They were restless even when things were quiet. He should remember this one. He could be very useful in his upcoming project. After what seemed like an eternity to everyone involved, the prince finally rested his gaze on his second in command, Lieutenant Salza.
Lieutenant, have we received the terms of surrender yet?
We are monitoring the communications, and all we have heard is silence. Slowly, the prince nodded at what he had heard.
I'm pretty sure I didn't get through to all of you.
His voice was now louder and more direct than the soldiers had expected.
If you wish to challenge me, go ahead and do so. If you wish to surrender, do so without wasting anyone else's time.
Once again, there was that awkward silence after what Cooler had said. Then, out of nowhere, a large Bepian warrior emerged from the ruins thanks to Cooler's efforts. He looked very haggard, but he was still alive, blood pumping through his veins, his rage directed squarely at the prince. Cooler halted his soldiers with a simple gesture when they had raised their weapons in response. Cooler took a few steps forward in front of his small army, looking very carefully at the resistance and the very big survivor that he had managed to find, as if inviting him to engage further. The warrior spat some blood out before charging at full force at his oppressor, with his weapon drawn, his eyes wide, and screaming at the top of his lungs. But his enemy was ready for him, as this enormous, gigantic green man, taller than Cooler himself or anybody on the battlefield, charged his way toward the prince. Cooler just simply lifted the guy by the face, removing his weapon instantly with a precise movement of his tail.
You see, this is the taste of loss,
he said, before blasting the Bepian away with just a simple energy blast. He looked behind him as he dropped the warrior's lifeless body. Everyone was taken aback. Still shocked, but ready to cheer for Cooler. Any hint of insurrection had gone. "I think that was the last brave one," said Cooler. "Sergeant Doré, I do appreciate you bringing that to my attention. You may accompany us to planet Brench. I may have a proposition for you." The Bepian saluted, but was clearly taken aback by both the offer, or more accurately the order, and Cooler's use of an old name for one of his own planets. Why would he even bother to remember it? But it was something that the Brenchian contingent of his army greatly appreciated. "I'm sure the rest of you lot can handle the formalities."
"I will issue the necessary orders, my lord."
"Good. We have done well today, so let's head back toward our transport ship, shall we?" There was a lie, because he did all the heavy lifting, But was it, however, all that heavy, really? That, however, was not the main point. The main point was that Cooler believed that his troops needed to feel involved, and that their commander was present with them on the battlefield. Unlike his brother, who would just do it all himself and pretty much treat his army like trash. Lieutenant Salza, as usual, was very impressed by this strategy. It kept his men fighting fresh and relatively happy. When King Cold gave his son Cooler planet number 98, he had no idea what the future would hold for him. But he was glad that his new leader took a liking to himself and his unit. At least it kept him busy. But in reality, it went beyond that. Even with all of his recent successful acquisitions, as his father would like to call them, Cooler knew that he couldn't be on every single battlefield all at once to fight every single skirmish for his troops. But they would certainly feel more confident in their power if they felt that their leader was actually helping them out, involved in all of their victorious campaigns. However, Cooler's father did not appreciate his personal, direct approach. He would maintain such conduct during negotiations or trade deals, somewhere on a desk, but Cooler was uninterested in such matters. And it was weird because King Cold commanded a formidable army, an army which would normally be the backup plan if said negotiations would fail, and there was no proper representation of the throne. It felt like a huge missed opportunity to not utilize them, Cooler thought. That is, if Cooler was still considered for the throne at all, given his father's preoccupation, well, with the Sprog. He despised even thinking about that thing. His younger sibling was still quite young, essentially in his larval form, still pinky fresh, and King Cold had gone completely head over heels for it. A lot could have gone wrong when his brother, known as Freeza, had been born. His sheer power alone nearly obliterated the Cold Planet 1 laboratory, destroying the entire scientific staff, as well as the very, very expensive equipment. Yeah, that was a write-off. To keep him from destroying everything around him, they all had to quickly teach Freeza how to contain his power within his weaker forms. The king was very impressed by his progress, but Cooler was not. This brat was far too unstable to be taking the throne. Despite this, his father not only had him created, but was overjoyed with the overall outcome. It irritated Cooler so much, who had been always a fairly obedient son, never crossing a line and doing what he was told, and what he was meant to be learning. The fact that he was advancing the Cold Force's conquest was proof of his devotion to the Empire. Still, for some reason though, this was not enough. Insufficient for the King Cold. Cooler never confronted him about it though. He was just simply curious as to why he had been effectively removed from any considerations towards the throne, with no explanation in his own direction. Before Freeza had arrived, it was simply assumed that he would take it. But Cooler didn't really need a throne anyway. Those trade deals of his father's were boring to him to tears in fact. And through the army, he was gaining real power in the Empire. To Cooler, this was a much better option. He summoned Lieutenant Salza to his temporary base of operations as they landed on planet Brench. "Lieutenant, I was thinking, my father has his Ginyu force, a formation that, despite its, how should I put it, eccentricity, is rather effective. I could put something like that toward my disposal, perhaps." Salza cocked his brow. "I believe the Ginyu force was also under your command, my lord." "That is a valid point, yes, but It's still very much my father's toy, and he does have the ability to easily overrule my commands. I was even considering offering Captain Ginyu a transfer order towards my engagements. Salza gave him a long look, as in, I'm not sure the king would agree to such terms, my lord, though. That is an accurate assessment, yes. A Ginyu force without Captain Ginyu. Still, though, Lieutenant, I am considering candidates for a hypothetical new squadron, and you are on that list. I am? My lord, what a great honor. Honor that may be, but it would require you to get into better shape. I do not want to be responsible for you should you falter on the battlefield. I am also undecided about the future squadron list. I just thought it would be rather appropriate to inform you that you are on said shortlist. Before they could continue, though, one of the foot soldiers requested an audience. He was about to receive an urgent transmission from King Cold, it turns out. All right, fine. Leave the transmission to me, you two. You are dismissed. Cooler then noticed a massive holographic projection of his father, casually sipping wine from a glass as the room began to empty. While his father enjoyed remaining in his second form to increase his size and to also appear intimidating, the projectors themselves were designed in such a way that this impression was heightened even further.
Oh, Cooler. Beba told me about your recent success. What will the number be now? Would Planet 256 suit you?
I do not care, father. I'll leave it up to you. The king chuckled to himself.
My boy, it's easy to get lost in the numbers, I understand. Especially since we recently acquired the Saiyans. They are very active little monkeys, I tell you. They have provided us with some excellent deals.
So you're using a middleman now to cut out other middlemen. Father, you're rather astute. But let's be honest. You are not calling me to congratulate me on my recent victory, are you? That was set in stone. What do you want? Cold smiled. He liked Cooler's kind of getting to the point attitude, and allowed the silence to break for a moment.
So, I determined that you two are doing rather well. With your military successes and Frieza's enormous potential, I am considering retirement.
Cooler's face turned pale, and his usual purple turned pinkish. Retire? What exactly do you mean?
Isn't it obvious, boy? I'll be stepping aside. But don't worry. You'll have complete control over your operations, and Freeza will take over in my stead.
Cooler could hear Freeza wailing in the background. Oh, is he upset? Please tell me he's upset. His annoying squeaky voice coming from the outside of frame was getting on his nerves. It was basically, Daddy, I don't want to do this! With all due respect, Father, I do not wish to question your wisdom, but are you sure he's ready for all of this?
Why wouldn't he be, my boy?
First of all, he's already killed 13 of his assistants, leaving only Kikuno and Berry Blue intact.
We already have a lot of servants, my son. That's not exactly a problem.
He also lacks your prudent business sense, Father.
Oh, he will learn with experience, just like I did. It'll just take time. More importantly, he achieves results anyway by instilling fear in those around him. Very efficient, allowing many people to skip the boring part, as you would like to call my negotiations. I do remember your criticisms.
Cooler remained silent for a moment. On the one hand, he knew this day would come, but on the other hand, that blasted brat was not prepared. This was a foolish move. He'd be the end of them all. King Cole may believe that no one in the entire galaxy is capable of matching their power, but it could happen. There were other ways to harm said empire that didn't involve strength. King Cold finally broke the silence.
Are you unhappy with my decision? Perhaps you believe you would be a better candidate to lead the empire. If you wish to challenge your brother, you are welcome to come here and fight it out to the death.
Yeah, take on that freak. Cooler was aware that whilst he was much more in control of his power, Freeza was more naturally gifted, and, if not careful, could cause him some serious harm. Then he wouldn't be able to operate anything. Besides, it never felt right for him to fight his own kind. At least not directly. No, Father, that would not be necessary.
I'm glad this is the case. But don't you worry. I'm giving myself a year or so to wind things down. And I'm not leaving wholesale. I'll just be waiting in the shadows, keeping an eye on the pair of you, so I can give you advice perhaps from behind the scenes.
So that's what it was all about. Keeping power by transferring responsibility to someone else. Cooler felt bad for Freeza. If only he realized what his father was doing. But he bet the little larvae were practically jumping up and down with excitement over his upcoming promotion. He wouldn't care. Well, father, I shall take my time processing this. Meanwhile, I hope to see you in good health the next time we meet in person. I would wish to talk with you more, but I have my obligations.
Ah, yes, that's my Cooler. Always concerned with duty. Well, until the next time, my son. Dismissed.
Cooler was left alone in the dark, empty room. He realized now, more than ever, that he needed his own squad and as much independence and independent infrastructure as possible. He had no intention of seceding from the Empire. He was loyal to a fault, but he knew that Freeza would make his life difficult just to spite him, for no reason. The more preparations he could make prior to the power transfer, the better. And if the Sprog fell from grace due to his unstable nature, Cooler would happily step in to fill the power boots. I mean, he had no choice. There was no other option. And that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now.